Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Harkness. I'm the programming manager at the Portland Public Library. I'm joined today by Sarah Skowinski, head of adult services at Portland Public Library, and Lewis Robinson, former programming manager at Portland Public Library, for our literary lunch this week. Today, we're really excited to have Jake Sawyer, Cliff Gallant, and Lewis Robinson here with us to talk about Jake, an American Original, Volume 1. The life of the legendary biker, bodybuilder, and Hell's Angel. Welcome to Cliff and Jake and Lewis, and thanks for being with us.
Okay, so Jake Sawyer was born in 1938 and raised in South Portland, where his father was the chairman of the town council. He lettered in 3 varsity sports and graduated from Kent Hill Prep School with honors. He is an honorably discharged U.S. Army paratrooper. Jake became the first Hell's Angel from Maine. He did time in the Maine State Prison, San Quentin, and Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary, but was not a typical lawbreaker who broke the law for the usual reasons. Each incident had relevance to the personally developed code of honor Jake lives by and is delineated in the book. And this is the book. And volume 2, I think, comes out later this month. Outside of prison, Jake has made his living over the years by owning and managing well-known health clubs in the area and has trained many state champion bodybuilders. He currently volunteers his time running health and fitness classes in Portland for people facing a variety of physical and mental challenges. So Cliff Gallant, who helped him write this book, was born in 1945 and raised in the local area. A University of Maine graduate, Cliff was a longtime special education teacher in the Portland school system and longtime columnist for the now defunct Portland Daily Sun and the Bollard, which is now the Mainer. Jake, an American Original, is an adaptation of the serialization of Jake's life that originally ran in the Bollard from 2016 to 2018. So thank you so much, Jake and Cliff, for joining us today. Jake is calling in, so we'll hear his voice on occasion. But I want to start by asking Jake some questions about his amazing life story. And I wanted to start, I referenced in the introduction, you're coming from a prominent South Portland family. And I wanted to move forward in time to when you were a young teenager, I think 14 years old. What I see and what the book chronicles as the kind of first big turning point in your life. And I was wondering if you could tell us that story.
Yes. My mother was involved in an unhappy marriage, and she developed a relationship with the mailman in our area. And I would come home from school in the middle of the afternoon sometimes and find them in compromising situations. And I was very young at that time, maybe 10. And I got very upset about it, and this went on for years. My father was working hard at work in town. This would happen during the days. And over a period of time, I became extremely upset about it. And I came home from school one day, nice warm October day, and they were at it again, and there was no real thought process involved because I'd gone through this mentally many, many times. I just picked up a pair of knife, ran in there and stabbed him in the ass, and when he headed for the door, I caught him one more time in the thigh, and it was the happiest day of my life. And I didn't care what the consequences were at all.
Yeah, so I can imagine that moment was a big one for you. So how do you feel like it changed your life? Like how did it change your relationship with the world, and what changed after that?
Went out the front door. I went out the back door, jumped over a stone wall, ran through a neighbor's garden down to Dana Beach, washed the blood off my hands in the ocean, and jumped up on a stone and proclaimed myself the angel from hell. And I was so proud of myself, man. And I went over to my friend Phil's house, and he was like 3 years older than me, and he had some hard cider. I didn't tell him what had just happened, but we sat down, drank some hard cider. I got a nice buzz, and then I headed home. A very proud young man, knowing I'm probably going to jail and don't care at all because I got that guy out of our lives. And so I went home, and came through the door, and it's like nothing ever happened. Either my father didn't find out from my mother, or my mother. Anyway, no one ever mentioned that incident. And so I never mentioned that incident again either. And I never mentioned what happened until after they had all died. And of course, it's a very important part of my story. And in the book, we agreed to kind of gloss it over a little bit. But when you ask me straight out questions, I'm not the type of guy that can gloss things over too well. You're going to hear what I think. So,
And
anyway, after that, at the age of 15, I got my driver's license and got a job that summer washing dishes. There's a couple of black guys up at the old Samoset Hotel. And I had a 46 Ford Coupe, and a friend of mine and I used to go down and chase girls in Booth Bay Harbor on our days off. We didn't know what the hell we were going to do. We never really did much of anything, but we had a lot of fun trying. And I matured very quickly after that particular incident because I knew I had a gift that most people don't have, see? And most guys talk about doing things. If I want to do something, I go do it. That's just the way I am.
So Jake,
Lewis, I think it's worth noting that when Jake climbed up onto the rock that was on the beach there and yelled, "I am the angel from hell," that was years and years before he had even heard of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club.
Right.
Those words just naturally came out of him.
It was destiny.
That's good, Cliff. That's good.
This is that was Cliff Gallant, the interstitial voice entering into the conversation, just as he does in the book. I like that. I like that strategy of storytelling. That it's really, you hear Jake's voice throughout the book, but then there are moments when you appear and it's clear that you're writing all this down as Jake tells you. And really, offering little bits of commentary. Before we move forward in time in Jake's life from his teenage years into, military school and joining the paratroopers, et cetera, I want to hear a little bit about how this project started. And what Jake led you to approaching Cliff, first of all, and then Cliff, what helped you make the decision that you wanted to take on this project? So Jake, why don't you tell us about your decision to approach Cliff? Okay.
In 2009, I was out touring America with 3 goldfish and a cat in a small camper, and I stopped into Sonny Badger's ranch in Cave Creek, Arizona. You people may not know who Sonny Badger is. He's the greatest leader of men to ever walk the face of the earth. He's one of the leaders of the Hells Angels and has been for a long, long time. And he's always stuck with me through thick and thin. We're very close. He suggested. Anyway, I rode up to his ranch and he's got horses, and wow, I said, well, things are going great. And he said, yeah, well, you ought to write a book yourself, you crazy bastard. Maybe you can get some Arabian horses too. I said, yeah, well, I'm too busy living it. And, but anyway, when Sonny suggested that I ought to do a book, and I saw how he was now living. And then I ran into Cliff, and I've been reading Cliff's work in a local publication, and I really liked his style of writing. And he weaves humor through all his stories. He makes them live. He's real good. We're not going to go dancing together, but he's a good man.
Well, you've never asked me.
Yeah, it ain't going to happen anytime soon, pal.
So after he asked you, Cliff, to talk us through that thought process.
Well, okay. Well, essentially, what happened was Jake approached me on the street one day and said, "You're a writer. I've seen your writing in the Ballad, and I've seen your picture, and you're going to write my life story." Well, I was pretty skeptical because I had other plans for my life, But Jake's a very convincing fellow, and I had known something of Jake Sawyer. You can't live in Portland and not have heard of Jake Sawyer. So I was intrigued by the idea of having him, sit down and tell me the details of his life. I was still a little bit reluctant, but he kept going, and then I had to solve how am I going to do this? No matter how interesting a person is, if they're telling you tale after tale, after a while you get to be so okay, I've heard enough. But then Chris Busby, the editor of the editor of the Ballad, now the Mainer, came up with this idea of using the interstitial voice, where you insert yourself into the narrative. And it worked very effectively. I tried to let the reader in on how what Jake was telling me affected me. And Jake and I are very opposite individuals. We've had very much different lives. I'm a little bit naive about things. I haven't been around like Jake has. I haven't inhabited the world he has. And so the reader, I think, found it to be interesting. The effect of what he was telling me on me, and it sort of broke things up so that the interest kept flowing. And I will say that all the way through the book, Jake was stressing we need to have, in every chapter and every episode, we need to have sex, violence, and humor. And hopefully we managed to do that throughout the book.
Yeah, we did.
Absolutely. Actually, this is maybe a good time, Cliff, for you to tell folks listening, either live or to the recorded conversation, how they might find a copy of this book and the volume 2 that comes out later.
Well, okay. At the moment, people can go on Amazon.com and then just put in Jake Sawyer, and they will get volume 1. And volume 2 should be ready in about 3 weeks. Things have been slowed down by the virus here. This all should have been accomplished weeks ago. But, the printing process has been slowed down by the lockdown here. So the best way to get it is through Amazon.com. If someone doesn't want to deal with Amazon.com, I'm told that None Such Books in South Portland is carrying it. And as time goes on, we will be supplying other local bookstores with both volumes.
Great. Thanks. Okay, so Jake, you went from Kents Hill to Norwich, the military academy, and then into the U.S. Army paratroopers. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what the book as a whole reads like an instruction manual on how to live a full life. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what the military training that you had, how that affected your life, and what you took away from that and what you rejected and just, what you got from that.
Well, when I graduated from Kents Hill, and I'd heard about Norwich University, the military university up in Northfield, Vermont, and I knew a couple of friends of mine that were going there, and my headmaster, William W. Dunn, God bless him, the great former headmaster at Kent Hill School. He suggested it might be a good fit for me. Anyway, by the time I'd been at Norwich University for a year and a half, it was obvious to myself and the people that ran that university that I should find something else to do, because I was breaking lots. They have a lot of rules, and about the only rule I didn't break was I never testified against anybody. But anyways, I just quit Norwich University, and I said, well, now what am I going to do? I was eligible for the draft, so I said, well, I think what I'll do is I'll go down and join the Army. So I joined the Army, and at one point I was stationed at an Air Force missile tracking station in Highlands, New Jersey, and I got involved in a barroom brawl one night, and it was a pretty wild brawl, and I'd been heavily involved, and I was facing a court-martial and a possible 6 months in the stockade at Fort Dix for my participation. And my company commander came up to me one day and said, look, they're looking for a few paratroopers. Now, if you're in good shape, you work out all the time. If you're willing to volunteer for the paratroopers and can pass the entrance physical exam, I think I can get you sent to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and you can be a paratrooper. And I looked at him and I said, I want to be a paratrooper. I'd never been in a plane in my life. I didn't care. It sounded better than the stockade. So next thing you know, I was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I became a paratrooper. And while I was a paratrooper, I was running White Lightning for a while on the side. I had an Oldsmobile, 1954 Oldsmobile, two-door hardtop with Monroe load leveler shots on the back, so I could put 300 pounds of booze in the trunk, and the car still sat level. And that was my sideline while I was in the Army. And once I get out of the Army, done my time in service honorably, I got a job at General Motors, company car. I got a limited expense account. I got a suit. My mother and father are proud of Jonathan. There I am. And I'm working with General Motors. Well, I got bored with that. So one night when I was with some other executives from GMAC, we went to see the strip at the Farmington Fair. And this beautiful young lady came out on the stage, and our eyes met, and it was instant love. And she and I wound up getting to know each other a lot better in front of people, and the bosses found out about it. And that was the end of my career with General Motors. That was fine with me. I took my severance pay, bought a used Triumph sports car, went down and hooked up with a former paratrooper buddy of mine in Miami Beach and started working in the health clubs and never looked back. I've been working in gyms all my life ever since. I'm 82 years old and I'm still working out every day.
So that's something that has stayed with you the whole way through, is your like physical fitness and attention to diet. Is that right?
Well, I'm an adrenaline junkie that like it. Found that I really like life on the other side of the railroad tracks. Yeah. The wilder the better. And I knew instinctively that I better try and put some muscle on this average size frame of mine, because with my attitude, I knew I better get ready, because I just knew I was going to start. I better be able to fight pretty good, as good as I can. So I really got into it, and I wound up becoming extremely strong. I was runner up to the world champion in arm wrestling, the heavyweight class, 2 years in a row. years later, because I worked hard at it for years, and I kept getting bigger, and I kept getting stronger and stronger. And I ended up training guys. I trained 3 guys that set world powerlifting records. I trained them right down in a cellar in one of the oldest standing buildings in Portland on 4th Street. I trained guys in the cellar that end up setting state, New England, and in some cases world records. They trained right in that cellar on 4th Street.
What's your trick as a trainer? How do you motivate people?
Well, I'm a true believer in physical fitness because it took me, you'll see it, there's a lot of pictures in my biography, and I became very, very strong, and it amazed me that I became as large and strong as I did. And it's real easy to sell something if you really believe in whatever that product is. Well, the product, as far as I was concerned, is what I had accomplished was mind-boggling to me, and it always has excited me a lot to pass this knowledge on and my enthusiasm for physical fitness on to other people. And it's also, I've worked with a lot of people that have dealt with a lot of depression. I was captain of the San Quentin prison weightlifting team. And there's a lot of guys they're depressed because they're where they deserve to be. So anyway, I found that anybody that I ever got into exercise, the depression would almost always go away. If I could just get them motivated and get them out on the track, or get them lifting weights, getting something, get them motivated. And I've always had the ability to motivate people because I've always led by example, you know? And I love doing it. I'm still training people.
I like tracking in the book, the period of time between being a paratrooper and becoming Maine's first Hells Angel. And I like that you describe jumping from an airplane into the sky and comparing that to what it felt like to weave through traffic at 90 miles an hour with your fellow angels. So could you tell us a little bit about like that stretch of time in your life and when you first, got hooked up with the Hells Angels and what that brought to your life? Okay.
I bought my first motorcycle in the early 60s. I bought an old Harley Davidson for $300 of a used car lot up in Naples, Maine. Somehow rode it back to Portland, Maine. And I kept on riding motorcycles after that. And in 1965, I went to the Laconia races that I held every year and have been for many, many years. And that particular year, there was a big riot at the Laconia motorcycle convention. And I was down in the section of, I was on crutches, incidentally. I'd been in a serious motorcycle accident the year before. So anyways, I rode my motorcycle up Laconia the next year with a rack for my crutches on the back of my motorcycle. I'm downtown Laconia, the Weirs Beach area, and cars are getting lit on fire. The National Guard had been called. The National Guard started charging down the street and arresting people. And I was standing there on crutches and I couldn't run away. So I just stood there in my crutches and the old National Guard, they could see I wasn't doing anything to anybody. So they just rushed on by me. And I went over and got on my motorcycle after a while. And I was riding out of town. Oh, but before then I'd heard people talking about the Hells Angels are here. The Hells Angels have got this whole thing started. It's all about the Hells Angels. And I'm saying to people, who the hell are the Hells Angels? He said it's the roughest, toughest motorcycle gang in the world. They're from California. I never heard of them. He said, well, anyway, they're very dangerous people. So anyways, I said, okay. So I'm leaving town. I'm riding up a road, and I slowed down a turn. There was a beautiful woman with a group of people, and our eyes met. And I pulled over to start talking to her. And this big, hairy guy, twice my size, very sweaty, got my face. And he's telling me what he's going to do to me, and it's not going to be good for Jakey boy. So without thinking, I clamped onto his nose with my teeth and held his shoulders with my hands, and I ripped his nose, as much of his nose off as I could, like a shark does it with prey. I did it to him. And in all the excitement stuff, I swallowed that part of his nose. Anyway, now I'm covered with blood. So I took off, and I went away. And I kept thinking about the Hells Angels, and I read about them in the newspaper. And then time went by, and I was running the first health club they ever had in Lewiston, Maine. And my girlfriend at the time was a registered nurse, and she told me one day, she says, I have a girlfriend that's making big money as a private duty nurse in Oakland, California. What would you think about moving to California, Jake? And you could, go into the health club business out there. I said, Oakland, California. Well, I knew the Hells Angels, I knew Sonny Badger and the Hells Angels were in Oakland, California. And I said, darling, I would love to go to Oakland, California with you. And we got out there, and she became one of Henry J. Kaiser's last private duty nurses over at Lake Merritt at the Kaiser Center. He lived on top of that, and she was one of his private duty nurses. And while she was taking care of Henry J. Kaiser, I started hanging out with the Hells Angels and fell in love. I fell in love with the Hells Angels. And I'm still in love with the Hells Angels. They're the elite of the elite.
So tell us a little bit about how you fell in love with them. What was it about the code that attracted you?
Well, many Hells Angels have been in military service, and these are the first. These guys made a big impression on me because they say what they think. They look you in the eye, and they don't bother talking behind your back. If you have issues with them, you deal with it straight on and honestly. And they were so honest and so loyal to each other, and obviously so highly respected by a pretty large segment of society around San Francisco in that area at that time. And we loved doing the same thing, chasing women, raising hell. And they became my family.
So what were some of the most exciting moments for you as a Hells Angel? Could you tell us a story about that period of time in your life?
Well, it's a great ego trip to be on when you're in your 20s, to have average people on the street, when they see you coming, they're either really glad to see you or they're not glad to see you, but they're sure as hell paying attention because they know that anybody wearing the Hells Angel patch will fight anybody to the death anytime, and it's been done over and over and over again. And I love guys that are willing to take it all away. And that's one reason I love the cops. How do you like that? I have a lot of respect and high regards for police, and I've had my problems with the cops because I caused the problems.
Louis, this might be a good point to ask Jake how he ended up in San Quentin. I think one thing worthy of note is that most people at San Quentin, in fact, all people at San Quentin, have graduated there after being in lesser lockups. When Jake ended up in San Quentin, it was the first time he had been in jail, which is unprecedented. And so you might want to ask him how he ended up in San Quentin. It's directly related to the Hells Angels.
Hey, Jake, how did you end up in San Quentin?
Well, as a prospect for the Hells Angels, a situation presented itself where the chapter, the Nomad leadership decided we're going to go and attack these guys that they're upset with. And while the plan was going on, and I told Sonny Badger this later on, and we talked about it in 2009. I said, look, I was a prospect. I knew I wasn't supposed to say anything, but the plan that had been laid out was we're either going to wind up dead or in prison forever. And everybody voted, and everybody voted to attack. And so being a prospect that's not backing off anything, I said, yes, Hells Angels forever. And Lonesome says, well, since you're now so eager for the attack, we're going to have you lead the charge. You're going to go knock on the door. And when they open the door, you grab the guy that opens the door and spin around. You use him as a shield, and we go through the door. I said, I got no gun. No, you okay. I says, I'm screwed, and off we go. So I went down there, and I knocked on the door. Door opened. It's a young teenager. I threw him in the closet. I was charging into this house, and the woman comes out of a side bedroom screaming. I threw her back into the bedroom, and now there's a guy down the end of the hall. He started shooting at me. I was leading the charge, so I found out later on he shot 9 times right at me, and he only hit me once, just grazed my head enough to make the blood run down my face. It's a nice picture in the book. Yeah. Anyways, I got a hold of him, and I beat on him, and all of a sudden my brother's hollering, hey, we got a serious wounded brother, so I stopped doing that. I didn't feel he deserved to get any more than a beating anyways. So I left that guy there, and we took the wounded to the hospital. We got arrested. We went to trial. We went to prison, and they sent me to Susanville, a medium security institution. And I, myself and a black guy up there organized the first prison uprising in California where the blacks and the whites stuck together. We shut down the prison, started fires and things of that nature. And being one of the ringleaders, I got sent to San Quentin. And Cliff asked me one time, he said, geez, you must have been nervous when you pulled up in front of San Quentin. It was pretty scary. I says, Cliff, no, you know what it was? I was curious. I was just curious. Because I know I'm going in there, and I know they're all violent. But you know what? I've already proved myself, man. I can deal with this. Let's go find out what's going to happen. And I'm still here.
What surprised you about being in San Quentin? What happened that was not what you expected?
Well, everything I expected happened. I had people try to kill me. I got stabbed in the back walking down the industrial alley in the lower yard one day, headed for the shoe shop. And what you had there in the mid-'60s was over 5,000 violent guys in a small area, and there was violence all the time. And one of the things I did to get people a little spooked and want to stay away from me, I went to the South Block one day and they had an advertisement on the wall. They were looking for an inmate to volunteer to work in the morgue in the hospital in the South Block. I volunteered to go work in the morgue.
Wow.
I let everybody know I was working in the morgue. Okay? So I'm moving the bodies around and stuff like that. And certain people started acting differently around me because, I don't know, some people get nervous about that. I don't know. I never understood why, but some people made them nervous. I worked in the morgue. So I felt that was kind of helping me stay alive.
Yeah. Makes sense. How long were you in there? Were you in the prison?
I was in prison a little over 2 years, and I was in San Quentin probably maybe a year and a half, something like that.
Yep.
The story of how I got out of prison, I was sentenced to prison with a sentence of 5 years to life and 2 6 to 10, all for violence. And how'd you get out in such a short time, Jake? I got thinking one day, and I remembered I had a friend of mine I grew up with in South Portland. His name was Harold Pacious. And I knew that he was President Johnson's press secretary at this time. So I wrote my old pal Harold a letter saying, you know, I got myself in this trouble, and if you could help me in any way, I'd appreciate it. But if you don't want to become involved in any way, I'd certainly understand why. And next thing you know, he's got a couple of lawyers that he graduated from Princeton with, visit me in San Quentin. And they started pulling strings, and bing, bang, boom. And I went to parole board, and they granted me parole. And the warden was so upset that I was granted parole that he got in touch with Governor Reagan trying to stop it.
Wow.
And digress a little bit. One day, because they check all incoming mail, all of a sudden I started getting letters on White House stationery, okay? Well, in the mailroom, they started paying attention to that. And Big Red, the warden, calls me up one day and he says, "What's your relationship with Harold Pacious?" I said, he's a big time lawyer and he's trying to get me the hell out of here. He says, "Okay, so get out of here." Gladly. Anyways, next thing you know, I got parole. Harold Pacious got me out of prison.
What was it like when you got out?
Well, the first thing when I got out of prison, I went up, picked up my 64 Chevy Super Sport automobile because I got to drive to Maine. They gave me 7 days to get to Maine, but can't leave California without going down and partying with Sonny Badger and my family.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I went right to Sonny Badger's house. Sonny was glad to see me. And while I was in San Quentin, he sent this beautiful blonde to see me. And I'd gone, making a long story short, I went right over the divider and ran my hand right up her dress, right in a visiting room full of people. And the goon squad came in and hauled me away. And Sonny called her up. And she came over that night, and I spent my second night out of San Quentin in Sonny Badger's bed with a beautiful, highly educated blonde. And then we partied for about 3 days, and then I took off across the country, and I had some adventures going across country. The biggest adventure I had going across country, I said, well, I used to run, before I went to Oakland, California, I had been running the Mid-City Health Club on the corner of Beach and Washington Street in the middle of the combat zone in Boston. So I can't drive by Boston. Well, by this time, I'm already 2 or 3 days late reporting to the parole officer. So anyways, I decided to go see my friends at the Novelty Bar, biker bar where I used to hang out. So I walked in there in full Hell's Angel regalia, and it's full of these guys called the Devil's Disciples. Well, I'd never heard of them. So I walked in, and they took one look at me, and boy, they all just wanted to fucking kill my ass. So things happened real fast. After I walked in, I looked around, and I said, "Hi, guys!" And they all attacked me. There's so many guys jumped on me, man. They couldn't kick me. They couldn't punch me or nothing. I was safe. I was in the cocoon. But then all of a sudden, the Lord being on my side, the pile shifted enough And I got out of that pile of guys. I headed for the side door to get out onto Beach Street. There's a big fat guy standing at the door. I plastered him in the face, went out the side door, and when after I hit him, one of them hit my right hand with a beer bottle and severed all the tendons across the top of my right hand. Blood's gushing everywhere. Now I'm running down Beach Street, headed for Washington Street, and a bunch of huge cops were right behind me, right under their arms. And I hailed down a cab and said, take me to Mass General. They told me to Mass General. I got in there, make another long story short, I don't know how much time we've got. But while we're up there, they said, look, we got to wire your tendons back together, so we got to put you to sleep. I says, no, I can't do that. I said, look, I was raised up by the Shaker community up in Maine. I was raised by the Shakers, and we're not allowed to take medication to put us to sleep because we're not in touch with the Lord. And make a long story short, they said, okay, we'll give you a local anesthetic, but if you can't stand it, it's on you and whatever. And I said, yeah, go do it. So anyways, it was extremely, very, very painful. And they put me back together, and the next day I reported to my parole officer and told him I hurt my hand changing a tire. A school teacher. And he told me to go get a job, and if I screw up one more time, I'm history. And I'm still here.
Yeah, that's great. We've got a few questions. I wanted first, though, to bring Cliff back in. I would love to know about the challenges of like what was the hardest part of putting this book together for the two of you. What was the hardest part?
Well, I don't know if it was hard, but, we were dedicated to making it interesting throughout. We didn't want there to be any dull parts. Jake has led a life that has been like tumbling from one bit of action to the next, and we wanted the book to reflect that. And the mantra we went by, as I mentioned before, was we would always have in every paragraph, if possible, sex, violence, and humor, those three elements. And so, when I got to a passage where I thought, I don't know what to do now, I would think of those three words and something would come up. And, in every episode that I had with Jake, interviewing him, I thought, well, this was fantastic, but obviously this is going to end. I don't think he's got much more to add to this. But invariably, the next time we'd get together, he'd have some new fantastic tale to tell me. So what made the book doable was the incredible life that Jake has led.
What about for you, Jake? What was hard about it?
I'm very lucky and I'm very fortunate to have had you as a writer because you did a terrific job. You did a wonderful job. But I'm not the type of person that gets along. I don't fit in with what people. I live by my own code, and most people don't. I don't relate to most people because I think most people are pretty weak.
Okay, so one question we've got from an audience member, from Cece, is about just a follow-up question about Sonny Badger. You mentioned you called him the best leader of men you ever met. Can you say more about that?
Sonny Badger was born with a natural ability to draw other men that think like him together. I've talked with Sonny about this, and Sonny told me that we're the type of guys, there's very few people other like us in the world. Because if you do any research on the Hells Angels, you find out we never give up. We never retreat. We fight to the end. And I admire people that are willing to put it all on the line for what they believe in. And once again, that makes me bring in the cops again, because I respect the hell out of all those brave bastards, even though I've had my problems that I caused. But I take great pride in having been a Hells Angel, because very few people can make it through the prospectship to become a Hells Angel. I did it in 3 weeks. I think I became a member in 3 weeks. If you're willing to stride into gunfire, it'll get you, apparently get your application moved up on the pile. So if you want to be a Hells Angel, that's the way to get in real fast, okay?
Okay.
Ah.
Excuse me, Louis. Are we going to be able to pan Jake's walls to see some of the memorabilia that he has all over his walls there? It's fascinating stuff.
That's great. Can you give us a little bit of a tour or no?
We originally planned to do this interview in my apartment, where the walls are covered with Hells Angel and military history relating to me, but we had to do it where we're doing it now at a different location, because we didn't have a feed to go out from.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we're at the bunker, Cliff.
Oh, okay.
So Jake, a couple more questions from audience members. One is someone's asking if Bruce Chambers is still living.
Yes, he is. God bless him. Yes, there's a great story about Bruce Chambers and I in Volume 2. Bruce Chambers was one of my training partners. At one time, he had 22-inch arms. And when he was in the Maine State Prison, he was squatting over 900 pounds for reps. And Archie Moore told me a long time ago, Archie Moore was a famous boxer from years ago, and Archie told me years ago in Pasadena, California, I see you working out hard, kid. I said, I'm going to tell you the secret of how I became a multiple world champion. I said, okay, what's the secret? He says, fresh cow's blood. So I remembered that. When I came back to Maine, I talked to Bruce. I said, look, Archie Moore told me if we drink fresh cow's blood, we're going to get stronger faster. He said, I'm willing to give it a shot. So we went out to the Triple J Packing Company, which was located on Prosumska Street at that time. And they pulled a cow up, and I had Bruce holding a big bucket, and they slit the cow's throat, and the blood gushed into the bucket. And then me and Bruce and I drank some of it. And we took some, we said we want to take some home with us, so they give us a jug full of it. And we left, and we never drank it again, and it never made us stronger. And Archie Moore was up in heaven laughing his ass off at those two crazy white boys that went for that crazy story.
We've got a great question from Liz, who is wondering if there's anything that you haven't yet done in your life that you'd like to do.
What I'd like to do next in my life concerns one of my early students who was 16 when I started training this young man. Later on, he became a highly decorated captain in the Green Berets. After that, he became a very successful financier, and he's also has an office in Hollywood. He has something to do with movies. He told me that a lot of returning servicemen that are now hospitalized have been reading my stories, and they love the stories. So what we're looking forward to doing, I've told Cliff about this, is we're going to get together with Captain Sawyer, and we're going to put our books in these military hospitals so that these returning veterans can read these books, and they can, apparently combat veterans relate to me and how I've lived my life, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to start visiting these veterans hospitals and walking into those rooms and make them so happy, the tears of happiness are gonna run down their faces. I have the ability to do that with people. And I'm gonna have people with me, and we're gonna go cheer up our returning heroes. That's the main thing I wanna do with my life as soon as we get this ball rolling.
Yeah, Cliff mentioned that you had wanted to help people with PTSD. Is that right?
I have PTSD. I have a case of PTSD myself. VA keeps in touch with me. The latest time they got in touch with me, they say, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "I'm doing fine." He said, "Well, we got a new thing for you." I said, Go on down. So I went down there, and they had me and a bunch of other guys with PTSD sitting in there, pretty rough crew. And they came out with Disney coloring books and multicolored crayons. And they give us all coloring books and crayons that says, "You do this, it's going to help you with your PTSD." And so we were laughing. Yeah, right, okay. Well, I took my coloring books home, right? And I wound up coloring that coloring book, and you know what? It did help me. And I checked with some of these other veterans, and they did some coloring too. And I don't know what it is, but we excel at coloring. I never cross the lines. It brings peace to me and other combat vets to be coloring these coloring books from time to time.
Nice.
Yeah, it works.
I have one more question about your relationship to Maine. And you described that journey back from California when you got out of San Quentin and had to report into your parole officer. But I'm sure that there have been other times when you've been out on adventures and then you keep returning to Maine. So what is it about Maine that has kept it your home for so many years?
I'm a student of history. In particular, I'm a student of the history of this area. I love this area. And so I've always returned home. I guess you call it home base, and I love it here, so I've always returned. But I always take off again because there's always another adventure coming down the pike,
I wonder if Cliff, there are any remaining things you want to say to our audience before we sign off?
Okay, well, I think someone obviously has to refer to the book for the full story, but going through it here, we didn't touch on a few major things. One of them being that Jake, when he was about 25 years old, when he was running the health clubs here in Portland, had a motorcycle accident where his right leg was virtually severed. And the doctors told him that he would never walk again, certainly never ride a motorcycle again, but he struggled and struggled. And they ended up putting a piece of metal between his femur bone and his hip, I guess. And over a couple of years, after a lot of pain and struggle, he regained the ability to walk. But that was a major incident in his life. All of these dramatic things that he's done since that time, he's done with a leg that was basically restructured. So, that was a huge thing. And also you just asked about Jake's connection to Maine. It's worth mentioning that Jake is a descendant of some of the earliest settlers of the area, the ancestors of his that settled in York, Maine in the early 1700s. And he's also a direct descendant of Enoch, I guess it is, Enoch, Enoch Sawyer, who was the first ferryman between South Portland and Portland, ferried people across the Fore River. And Sawyer Street, which is the longest street in South Portland, is named for Enoch Sawyer, Jake's ancestor.
John
Sawyer, excuse me.
He was the first licensed person to bring people across that river, and he was licensed in 1719.
1719, wow.
Right.
I want to thank you both for taking the time to share these stories with us and we will have these books in the library once the library is able to purchase books again, which shouldn't be long. Rachel, if you want to say anything before we sign off.
I just wanted to thank you, Jake and Cliff and Lewis. Thank you so much for that conversation. It was really entertaining. And I got some private chats just saying that they were really enjoying it. And it's nice to hear the voices of the article that they've been reading for all these years. And thanks to everyone for tuning in on this sunny and not sunny Wednesday.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.